Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be going back to the tablet because the graphics card that we're looking at today is currently also in the PC recording this, so I can't really look at it live. So this is my RTX 2080 Ti Aorus Extreme. It's my daily card, and yeah, pretty much we're gonna be talking about some interesting things about the PCB that I wasn't really aware of. Because the last time I took this thing apart was a long time ago. Like, it's in a water cooling loop, and I only take it apart when I absolutely have to, which was the case because my blocks kind of were clogged up. So I took everything apart. And yeah, so looking at the PCB and considering that, like, you're always learning something, and since I took it apart the last time, I learned some new stuff as well. Looking at the PCB again, actually my opinion of this PCB got a lot better. So previously I assumed it's about as good as a reference PCB like a Founders Edition, but looking at it more, this PCB might actually be up there, like equal to a card like the Strix, for example. And yeah, so let's get into that. So the Aorus Extreme has some interesting VRM design decisions to it. First of all is all the entire output filter is SMD polymer capacitors, so those are the ones for vCore. Then you have these 6 ones for memory, and then on the back we have more of these. These are all 330 microfarads, the ones on the VRM. So in terms of total capacitance, this isn't all that high, but it's still a fair amount of capacitors. Like, this is more than you get on a Founders Edition. I think it's more than you get on the MSI card. In total capacitance, this is less than what you get on the Strix. I'm not so sure about the FTW, and well, it's less than the Kingpin for sure. But yeah, so for the big AIB custom PCBs, the output filter isn't all that bad. Like 330 microfarad isn't really that great individually, but you still have a lot of capacitors here. So the front is completely filled up, and then the back, there are some empty spots, but actually I counted them, and the back has the exact same amount of SMD capacitors, like polymer capacitors, that the Strix has. So yeah, maybe this was just a thing of, hey, we could put more there, but let's just put as much as the competition and call it quits, which apparently they did. So the back of the card has a lot of empty pads, especially for multi-layer ceramic capacitors, which basically means the moment the warranty on this thing expires, I'm absolutely going to load it. So we could add 1, 2, well, this is really too thick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know about this part, 6, 7 extra capacitors, and then the entire rest is just going to be absolutely filled with multi-layer ceramics. I think this part is memory, so this is not going to be core, but yeah, sure, you could also add some more capacitors to memory. So yeah, like all these empty spots, I'm not aware of another card that has this. So just in kind of ease of modding it's still gonna be like, gonna take a while to fill all of these with multi-layer ceramics, but at least you can do it. I'm not aware that you can do this on any other card. So it's a nice to have, I guess. And yeah, and then on the back there's another thing. So 2080 Ti's usually only have multi-layer ceramics behind the core, but the Aorus Extreme actually put 2 SMD polymers over here. And these are not 330 microfarads like the rest. Like, you can kind of make it out here, there's a 330 on there, but you kind of just can make out that 560 on this one. So the ones behind the core are actually 560 microfarad, which is more capacitance than you could fit with multi-layer ceramics. So there are 10 pads for multi-layer ceramics where this SMD polymer capacitor is, And as far as I'm aware, the biggest capacitance you can get multi-layer ceramic capacitors in for this packaging size is 47 microfarads. So 47 times 10 makes 470 microfarads, but we're getting 560. So we have more capacitance than what we could get with multi-layer ceramics, even though the SMD polymer capacitors have more ESR and DSL than the multi-layer ceramics. So we are sacrificing some electrical performance here for more capacitance, which is kind of the reverse than what they've done with the main VCore output filter, where they've used better capacitors but fewer capacitance overall. I can't really say how much using these capacitors behind the core impacts clocks. There was a whole thing with the RTX 30 series where like cards that had SMD polymer capacitors behind the core, though those were usually 330 microfarad, not 560 like these, where they had like stability issues that cards with multi-layer ceramics didn't have. But then again, there's the RTX 3090 Hall of Fame, which has SMD polymer capacitors and is currently, as far as I'm aware, the best card for extreme overclocking for a 3090. So there's really mixed reports on this, so I can't really say what kind of impact these two have. But yeah, I think it's not a bad thing. I think worst case it's just gonna do the same as having multi-layer ceramics here. Then another thing, that's actually a thing that I really like, is so usually 2080 Ti's have two sets of mounting holes. You can see that the Aorus Extreme only has one, because where the second set of mounting holes usually is, which would be here, and then on the back as well, the second set would be here. They added extra core filtering as multi-layer ceramics. So pretty much the multi-layer ceramics you would lose directly behind the core are now where the extra set of screw holes would be, which is not directly behind the core, but still pretty close. And yeah, that's something I really like, because like you just added extra core filtering, and then not just a bit, like that's 16 multi-layer ceramics. These are a pretty big package. These could be 47 microfarads, and 16 of those. That's almost what the pads behind the core that we are technically losing to the SMD polymers is worth. So that's a really nice thing. Like you're not using the second set of mounting holes anyway. I don't know why other custom cards, like I think the Strix has it. I'm not sure about the MSI, but I think the Strix has the second set of mounting holes that you just don't use. Yeah, why just don't do what Gigabyte did and use it for extra VCore power plane and extra output filtering? Because I think that's actually something that can help. Like, because those are pretty close to the core. Like, you can see here, like, you can't really get any closer to the core than this. So, and if you're not, like, the thing is NVIDIA and also AMD don't really allow people to mess too much with this area behind the core, or sometimes even the entire back of the core, like including the memory chips. Gigabyte seems to have, like, they can customize like their capacitor choice, but they can't really change anything about the layout. But it seems that because they don't need those screw holes, they could just swap that out for more output filtering, and that's really nice. That's genuinely very, very nice, because like you're not using the second set anyway. Why not put it to good use? And yeah, so like in terms of output filter, I think this card is like up there. It's like one of the best, I think. The only thing that is not the only thing that other cards do better is just the main capacitance that you have on your output filter right at the VRM. Well, actually, like the left side of the PCB is pretty much the same on all the custom cards, but the right side, where we have like another array of 330 microfarad SMD capacitors, SMD polymer capacitors. I think the Strix, I think the MSI card, I think the EVGA one, I think they opt for CAN-type capacitors with a lot more capacitance. So in terms of overall capacitance, those cards just win. But the thing is, CAN-type capacitors have even worse electrical characteristics than the SMD polymers that are used here. So you might have more capacitance, but electrically the performance is going to be worse. They have more ESR, they have more ESL. So they're gonna do a worse job at filtering, even though they have more capacity. Like per capacity, they do a worse job at filtering. You can still get a better job if you just use enough of them, but if you would have an SMD polymer with the same capacity as a CAN-type, the polymer would always win. So yeah, that's pretty much the only weak spot, is this right side of the VCore output filter, which just, there's nothing wrong with what Gigabyte has done here, it's just that the overall capacitance is just lower than other cards, and that might be an issue. Like that might result in slightly lower average core clocks than other cards. But then again, there's all the other improvements, which is like these that they added, and then also the thing that they did behind the core, which potentially, like, it adds more capacitance directly behind the core, but just capacitance in a capacitor that performs worse electrically than on paper. I should say on paper than multilayer ceramics, because like electrical characteristics are complicated. I don't know everything about it. Actually, I know very little about it. I can just repeat what I've heard and what would make sense to me. So I can't really say if what the two caps behind the core do. But a Gigabyte must have a reason to put that there. And then you also add the huge modding potential that you just have right here. Like, if you ever looked at an extreme overclocking card, like a card that's specifically made for liquid nitrogen overclocking, you will usually see, like if you look at your Kingpin or your Galax Hall of Fame card, what you usually see is just all the capacitors, like tons of capacitance, and also a lot more multilayer ceramics directly at the VRM than any other card uses. So if you would occupy all those pads, you could potentially, like, you're not gonna reach an extreme overclocking card in terms of capacitance, because at least Galax does that. Galax just puts a ton of CAN-types, a ton of SMD polymers, and then a ton of multilayer ceramics. Like, they just put all the capacitance on there, which here you can't do, but you can add a whole lot more than what you already get stock. Which, at least for the multilayer ceramics, could bring you up to par with an extreme overclocking card, but the extreme overclocking card is still gonna have more polymers and more SMD polymers and more CAN-types, and therefore a lot more overall capacitance. But yeah, you can still add all of those to this card, and then also like here to what's probably the memory rail. This card has a lot of modding potential. And if I ever pick up another 2080 Ti, I think I'm gonna look for another one with this exact PCB. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna pick up another 2080 Ti anytime soon, especially not in this time with this market. But maybe in 5 years or something, if I still do overclocking, maybe then 2080 Ti's are cheap enough to just pick one up. I think I'm actually gonna go for another Aeros Extreme. Like, first of all, it would match with my current card, which, well, I'm either going to run it until it dies, like my previous card, or maybe it will become too slow to use before it dies, and then I'm just gonna swap it out and have it for benching. But yeah, like, this is, like, looking at the PCB again, this is pretty nice for modding and overclocking, and just generally, like, the little things, like, especially my favorite part is just this, what they did with the screw holes. and then also the modding potential, and yeah, like this PCB is pretty great. Looking at it again, like before, I was assuming it would be pretty meh, but apart from that thing where it doesn't really have all the capacitance at the right side of the vCore VRM, it's pretty great. It's really, really great, in my opinion. There's only one thing which is going to be slightly annoying. So here's your vCore PWM controller. That's a UP9512, and here we have another UP9512 for memory. Yes, they're really using an 8-phase controller for a 3-phase memory VRM, but well, they probably had a lot of them. And yeah, so I recently, actually yesterday at the time of recording this, I bought a EVC2SX from Elmar Labs and some other stuff. And the EVC2SX is basically a little board. I'm gonna make a dedicated video on this when it arrives. It's basically a little add-on board that you can hook up to a graphics card, and you can talk to the PWM controller over the I2C, like I2C and I think some other interfaces. And instead of just volt modding it, like soldering something to it and tricking the feedback pin into putting out a different voltage, like if you hook up that thing, you can straight up just take control over the PWM controller and tell it what to do, and it will just do it. Like there's no tricking involved, there's no other modding required. You just hook the thing up and you just tell the controller, I want this voltage. I think you can even deactivate overcurrent protection. You can change VRM switching frequency. Like it depends on how smart the controller is. But the UP9512, like, it's not the smartest controller ever, but it has some smart functionality that the 9511 didn't have, if I remember correctly. Like, the 9511 is the controller you usually see on 10 series cards, and then the 9512 is pretty much the same, but with some more smart functionality that you see a lot on 20 series. And then on 30 series you actually see a big mix of both these controllers. Like, the cheaper cards go for an 11, sometimes the more expensive ones go for 12. So yeah, and the one thing that's bad about this is there's no like dedicated hookup point for the EVC2SX. So on other cards you see something like this, like where you have a square hole and then two circle holes. We just have something like this, and you can solder a header to that, and then you just plug the connector of the EVC2 SX into that, and then you have control over the controller. This card doesn't have something like that, and well, like the 7970 Lightning, for example, has that, which is a really old card. And I think there's some other cards that have it. I think some newer Asus cards have it, like 10 series and newer. I think they have that. This card sadly doesn't have that, so you can't just conveniently solder a header to it and then just hook it up. No, you're gonna have to look at the datasheet of the controller and then like trace things out to some SMDs and then solder to those, which you're gonna have to be very careful, because if you break them, the card is pretty much bricked. Because at that point, like, you could try to repair it, but in my experience that doesn't really work out with these super small SMDs, so you're basically stuck with e-powering the card, which on a card like the 2080 Ti, which has a vCore VRM on both sides, is gonna be very difficult, because e-powers only come from one side, and then you're gonna have a problem with like voltage dropping from, let's say, from right to left, and not just from the outside to the middle of the core. And with like the TU102 is a massive core. So I think if you e-power a 2080 Ti, you're gonna need a lot more voltage than stock. Like, I think you're never gonna get to the same clocks at the same voltage that you get stock with an e-power, no matter how good your connection is, just because you can't get that layout from the both sides of the core. So this is slightly inconvenient, and yeah, like this, having such a header, like you had like the front of the PCB is pretty cramped, but like where I put the drawing, like there was space for that, and then if you look at the back, yeah, that's pretty much empty. So there was enough space to add something like that, but Gigabyte didn't, which is a bit annoying, but it is something that I'm willing to, yeah, it's something that I'm okay with, because like those connectors are pretty rare, but yeah, like having something is very nice, and this card doesn't have it. But apart from that, and apart from that capacity thing on the right side of the VCore VRM, this PCB is really good. Like, I think this is generally like up there in the top cards. So yeah, I like this card more after looking at it again, and yeah, we have crossed 21 minutes actually. And by the way, if you're wondering, here's a picture of the memory chips I have. My card can actually max the memory slider at plus 1500 on top of a factory memory OC, so I'm landing at like 217047 megahertz or something in GPU-Z. If you ever cared about what memory SC I have 8 gigabit Samsung C-Die GDDR6, not DDR4, that would have been a bit bad. DDR4 C-Die sucks, but GDDR6 C-Die, like that's what you tells which die revision it is. At least on GDDR5, that was the letter which tells you. So I'm assuming it's the same on GDDR6. So this is 8 gigabit because we have, well, like each of these chips is 1 gigabyte, so that's 8 gigabit. Yeah. But, nope, go away. Yeah. I like this PCB a lot more now. And I hope you found this interesting. I somehow managed to stretch this out to over 20 minutes. I really thought this would be more like 10. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and we're gonna see each other next time. Goodbye.